Welcome back to part 3, where I'm going to walk and talk you through in this video all the key elements that you need to be aware of ahead of your Athletic Transcentral pre-seed information for the ACCA SBL exam March 2024. If you'd like access to my notes that are exclusive, you can see them above me. As always, as I'm sure you've seen from the previous videos, click the link in the description, you can download them there. And as always, I'm associated with Athletic, so if you want a mock paper doing or to access their pre-seed information, the affiliate links are down at the bottom. And for pure transparency, as always, I'd be entitled to a small commission that helps support the YouTube channel. But as always, a massive thank you for everyone who subscribes, likes the videos. Leave me any comments below. How are you getting on with the pre-seed materials? I'm sure you're enjoying football as well on there. But where we're up to now, if you haven't watched the previous two, I'd highly recommend it. I'm just going to take you through the key elements that I would wanting to be aware of going into my examination. And we're on part 3 now, looking at the media coverage and starting with the industry challenges. Now with media coverage, you've got to think about this logically, and this is the point of the case study, where it's a international football club, Athletic Transcentral, and the coverage that newspapers, social media wants to get out there, they're looking for stories, or in this case, obtain exclusive stories, and I've just put massive risk element there. So reading between the lines, you've got to think, maybe on the exam day, we could be given a situation that a player or someone from the club has actually been involved in something untoward, and it could have a negative impact on the brand or financially of the football club. In terms of the industry challenges now, the main challenge, and this is the key thing you've got to have in your mind, is the men's first team. If the men's first team is successful, then the football club and the revenues maintain and are also increasing on that, and they remain successful. However, to achieve success, this is where significant expenditure, buying the best players comes into it, higher salaries, and those are the key elements I highlighted there, because significant expenditure on players means a potential issue of financial fair play, that they could be in breach and they may have loss of points or fines. And the higher salaries, if you have a look at the earnings after or earnings before interest and tax, they are on the downward slope, even though revenues are actually increasing. Let's look at the next element now, because it goes into a bit more detail, that their income is greater than their expenditure, and we have the operating profits for a number of the leading clubs have fallen in recent years due to these increased costs. So that you could see that how they've given it to us in the pre-seed materials. There's the earnings before interest and tax, and for Athletic Transcentral, it is going downwards on there. The same with the relevant earnings, and therefore there is a risk of a breach of financial fair play. So this is where, and again, it's reading between the lines, but there's a possible risk and threat SWOT analysis on here, greater pressures, and I've just underlined the key elements of a loss of income, competition on there from other clubs is getting more and more higher as a result of this. And what could impact on the football club itself is losing their key players, their key management. What if we got on the exam day that a key star has actually got injured and they can't play for the season? There are other commercial elements such as the illegal live streaming, again very topical, that happens in the real world, but we could get that thrown in, that takes away income from Athletic Transcentral. Breaches of financial fair play regulations and the damage to the club brand. We're not really given any examples of this actually happening, so we have to be aware and have these sort of contingent plans to say, what if it happened, from the unseen information that we would be given on the exam day. And then just highlight a bit more about the journalists, the exclusive stories that we just touched on from the media coverage, again as a potential threat, along with lawsuits and fines. They've touched on health and safety from a player or fan perspective, it could come into it, and the security risk of when the fans are actually going to the stadium. Last but not least, not to overlook, they just snuck in at the bottom there, financial risks like interest rates, exchange rates, liquidity, solvency, capital structure, so the debt and equity balance or the working capital management. In the KPIs, they touch on cash flow, but they don't really give us much about cash flow. They give us hints about liquidity. So again, another area I would just have in the back of my mind going into your examination on there. Stakeholders will be on your exam in one way or another, and they give us a little paragraph if you ever get stuck in the exam where we've got internal stakeholders, as you would expect, the shareholders, the directors on there. But when it starts of other key stakeholders there, they're really highlighting at some of the external stakeholders, the broadcasters, suppliers on there, the police. These are different aspects of the business you should be referring to, because to get the top marks and to get you a pass in SBL, you have to refer back to the scenario and the company, in this case Athletic Transcentral, how it operates, the industry specifically and directly, and that is how you're going to get the marks for it. Do not overlook this table now for the leading teams in Thailand, and you can see I've highlighted Athletic Transcentral on there. These are things, again, you've got to have in your mind going into your examination, that they're in a good position. They're in the top 8 teams, so 8 out of 18, they're doing pretty well. But over the last 3 years, they're actually on a downward trend, that they finish 5th, then 6th, then 8th. Maybe they've lost a few key players, something might not be working right with the manager. But as you can see on there, the big teams in that top 8 have all remained in the top 8, so it's quite hard to breach it. But the elements on there that I've worked out are that the actual revenue comparison between Maritime and Athletic Transcentral, so number 1 versus number 8, is the stadium capacity is nearly twice as much and the revenue is nearly twice as much. Athletic Transcentral doesn't have one of these modern stadiums. We'll come on to it, as you can see just at the bottom there, but it's just little calculations that you can see that they're not as big in terms of the stadium. Their revenue is still high, but not as high as the others. And the key thing that separates this out is that the clubs with the top 3 teams in Division 1, Maritime, 1992 Lerwin and Orient on there, have all moved to new stadiums. So that's where the 73,000, the 70,000 and the 62 comes into it in the last 8 years. So do they have a competitive advantage over Athletic Transcentral, not just from a case of being able to get more fans into the stadium, but these are to built to increase their income, you can see in the next paragraph, for non-footballing events. This is to also maximise energy efficiency, reduce the carbon footprint. So there are ESG and sustainability points here, and could be possibly linked into a pestle model on there. All things that Athletic Transcentral don't have, and it could be the difference in them actually moving forward and progressing as a football club on there, because they're actually on a downward trajectory. We then come on to the sort of innovation and sustainability, further points that you can see where my mouse is on here, and clubs that use their own website and social media platforms to post the news themselves. The clubs in the top 4 of Division 1 have their own television channels. So again, Maritime, 1992, Orient and Spring, I've listed on there, all have their own TV channels where they can gain subscription income. But, and again, for your notes, got to refer to it if it comes up in the exam, Athletic Transcentral do not have their own television channel on there. It's a potential missed opportunity, and they should be looking at it potentially if they have available cash, or maybe it could be a means of getting them more international fans. But when we come on to it later, and in fact you can just see it up at the top there, they've only got a capacity of 38,000 in the stadium, and it tells us later on that it's at 96.5% capacity. So they can't actually fit any more fans. So they maybe are considering an expansion or a whole new stadium altogether. KPIs, they always throw these in the SBL examination, but the key thing for you to see is those little notes on the side. What I've referred to is, are we given information about this in the pre-seen information, or are we not actually highlighted anything at all? Well, the revenue, player sales, earning before interest and tax on there, the large gap in revenue, the high player salaries, we've already touched on those. But the interesting thing from the financial KPIs for your notes is we're actually not given too much information provided on the last 3. We're not given literally anything about cash flows. We're told that liquidity obviously is an important area. Nothing on player sales or purchases, and they've touched on capital expenditure, what it means when you buy a player, but we're not given any examples for it. So again, they've not given us any information. You should have that in the back of your head to go, hang on a second, I need to be on my toes if that comes up in my exam. And lastly, we have to look at the non-financial KPIs, again referring to these in your answers directly, looking at the league position on there. They've remained in the top 8 for the last 3 years. Average match attendance is at 96.5% for the men's teams. It's a heck of a lot lower for the women's and the under-18s and the reserves. But again, highlighting on there, non-financial KPIs, the number of season ticket holders that they have, we're not told that. Club website visits, not told that at all. So they could quite easily throw in information about those KPIs that we don't have too much information, and it will show up a student that's really understood the pre-seen information to someone that hasn't at all. With the last one being the compliance with applicable regulations, we're told about the consequences of non-compliance if they have done anything wrong. You'll see it later on with the IT director and the manager. They say that they are up to date with some of the standards and the regulations on there, but it's a case of you could quite easily have something that could cause a regulation to be broken on the exam day, and you'd have to then link it back to that would be not achieving, obviously, a KPI on there that you were not being compliant for it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of part 3 for your analysis of the pre-seen information. As always, if you want access to these notes, click the link in the description, leave me any comments down there, and thank you always, as ever, for liking, subscribing to the channel. It means so much. I hope the videos help to get you over the line for your SBL exam. So I've left a couple of videos up at the top. Click one of those, it's going to take you to the playlist, and I'll see you on the other side for another video soon. So thank you very much.